Hello there, this is Juan Gabriel Cegarra from Technical University of Cartagena. Let me tell you that at the end of 2019, Professor Constantin Bratiano, always dedicated to his work, contacted us to be plenary speakers of the International Conference on Business Excellence. Unfortunately, this conference, which should have been held in Bucharest, has been transformed into a virtual conference. For these reasons, due to the lockdown of the COVID-19, I have decided to prepare this little speech, which is entitled "Why Learning to Unlearn is More Important Than Ever." I do hope you enjoy with this presentation and, of course, with the rest of the conference. On this slide, you can see the summary of the key points we will discuss on this presentation. First, we are going to analyze what are the biggest knowledge management challenges facing companies today, how to overcome these challenges, that is the second point, and the third point, we will try to develop some of the knowledge management factors that can be used to overcome these problems. In the upper left of this slide, we can see the evolution of the IBEX 35 index. We can see how the step drop corresponds to an equally abrupt rise in the number of COVID-19 infections. Experts have identified three phases in the fight against COVID-19. Flatten, in the case of Spain, when the country locked down in order to flatten the virus exponential growth curve. 5, during which the different regions of Spain restart their economies while maintaining a low rate of infections while still running the risk of having to implement further lockdowns. And future, which begins only after a vaccine or highly effective treatments will have been found. Well, currently we are in the second phase. With tourism set to be deeply affected by COVID-19, perhaps the following months are going to be very tough for Spaniards. If we ask ourselves which have been the main errors and mistakes before and during phases 1 and 2 of the fight against COVID-19, in the Spanish press but also in the international press, we can find the following press headlines. For instance, The Guardian: how did Spain get its coronavirus response so wrong? The New York Times: healthcare kamikazes: how Spanish workers are battling coronavirus unprotected. The Financial Times: political divisions deepens as Spain battles COVID-19. Also, in the Financial Times, the Civil Guard says it works to minimize the criticisms to the Spanish government. The German press highlight that while Angela Merkel was self-isolating, the Spanish Prime Minister and his deputy both continued to attend cabinet meetings after their partners tested positive. Euronews: Facebook investigates fake accounts sharing Spanish government's contempt. Hidden figures: Spain official COVID-19. In other words, nobody knows the exact number of dead people in Spain. El País: Spanish civil guards official sack after COVID-19 report. Also El País: women's death march despite the coronavirus fears. More or less, you can have an idea about the news Spanish people have had during the last few months. Well, with this review of the news, we are not going to say if the Spanish government has done it right or wrong. That is not our job. However, we can affirm two important things. On the one hand, COVID-19 crisis has taken the Spanish government, as many others, by surprise and without the necessary resources to combat it. On the other hand, Spanish companies and also the civil society in general have been exposed to a series of classic problems, unless from the point of view of knowledge management. On this slide, you can see some of these old problems. For instance, knowledge loss derived from, well, not only from the loss of people, but also from accidentally deleting of data. or not preserving adequate documentation to interpret reports, sensor reading failure, among others problems could be included in this category. The presence of unverified sources of information. Here we are referring to the presence of back counter knowledge in the form of fake news, hoaxes, partial truths, or even lies or slanders. Defensive routines that individuals engage in to avoid the creation of situations that are likely to cause embarrassments. These actions may result in the hiding or even the deletion of knowledge. And knowledge hiding, defined as an intentional attempt to conceal or withhold knowledge that others had requested. Well, it would be good to remember that these variables are interconnected. For instance, the more knowledge is lost, the more disinformation is generated, or the more information one hides, the more one clings to unconventional sources of information, such as bad counter knowledge in the form of gossips, partial lies, hoaxes, or exaggerations. In previously published papers in business administration and knowledge management, we have seen how unlearning or setting aside outdated knowledge can help people overcome many of the problems raised in previously slides. There is a need to unlearn so the organization can both recover from knowledge loss and also identify situations where they need to overcome this misuse of negative counter knowledge. We consider that either the loss of knowledge or negative counter knowledge require taking specific actions to stimulate relearning and hence provide for the creation and assimilation of new knowledge and new knowledge structures. Thus, we will focus on what we consider intentional unlearning as one way to counteract either the problem of the loss of knowledge or counter knowledge. Now the question bears how we can operationalize this unlearning process. In doing so, I have invited my very good friend Anthony Wensley to provide us some of his own views.
I am Professor Anthony Wensley of the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and I have been researching many aspects of unlearning with Professor Juan Gabriel Cegarra and other colleagues for the last 10 years. Today I would like to discuss how our research informs perhaps the most pressing issue that we are facing today, namely how to unlearn inappropriate or plainly incorrect approaches to addressing the COVID-19 crisis and learn new and more appropriate approaches. I also hope to show how we might improve our ability to respond to future crises. In doing this, I hope that Juan and I will be able to demonstrate the applicability of the research we have been working on. In the following, I would like to make reference to the summary slide, as it will allow me to guide you through the stages of unlearning, while also allowing me to discuss some of the potential outcomes of our inquiry. One of the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic is that to a significant extent, although the virus itself was referred to as a novel virus, it was not new in all respects. The pandemic was preceded by a variety of widespread viral infections, including SARS, MERS, H1N1. Many experts and countries have developed approaches to managing these previous viral infections. However, given the different characteristics of COVID-19, many of these responses turned out to be partially or totally inappropriate. Thus, as we note on the slide, the awareness stage of unlearning requires that one accepts that one might be wrong, that previous approaches do not work. Admitting this also requires a level of trust, both in the experts and our planners and politicians. How many times have we seen reassuring statements that there was no need to engage in any significant action, COVID was just like influenza, and it would either be harmless, we could build up herd immunity, or it would simply go away as many countries, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, moved into summer. Admitting that one might be wrong does not mean that existing solutions or approaches are automatically thrown out. Dogmatism does not have a place during this stage. It may turn out that As more information is gathered, differences between old and new problems and situations are relatively unimportant, and hence the old solutions can be applied, or components of existing approaches may be included in new approaches. Not only does admitting one is wrong require interpersonal trust, but also institutional trust and international trust, which has been sadly lacking in this particular case. We have to create environments where questions can be openly asked, drawbacks and missing information identified, and in many cases, authority and expertise questioned. Expertise is based on prior experience, which doesn't mean it should be rejected automatically, but it should be open to question. Such questioning is disruptive and upsetting. Thus, we have to create supportive environments both locally and globally. This may be challenging because not all cultures tolerate an open questioning of authority and power. During the awareness stage, care must be taken to make sure that all approaches receive an adequate hearing. Reviewing a diversity of perspectives is vital. This necessitates the inclusion of individuals with diverse knowledge, backgrounds, and value systems. The importance of establishing communication between and tolerance of widely differing disciplines and bases of expertise cannot be overemphasized. In the case of COVID-19, major behavioral changes were required of ordinary citizens, and thus it was necessary to create appropriate communication strategies. These could not be done in theory. They had to be done in consultation with appropriate individuals, taking into account cultural and social sensitivities. Awareness is but the start of the unlearning process. Once we have essentially undermined the current state of the art, as it were, we need to judiciously give up or modify inappropriate or incorrect knowledge or beliefs. This can only be done mindfully and will require close cooperation and support. Relinquishing old knowledge and beliefs is an extremely challenging stage, and one which will require building on existing relationships and trust and forging new relationships. Major gaps in our knowledge may be identified, and effort must be expended filling them. Some gaps may be very difficult to fill and may create considerable anxiety, as for example the knowledge necessary to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. Similarly, in many countries, totally inadequate protection was provided to those most at risk from the virus, and the scope and range of medical support necessary was grossly underestimated. Once we have relinquished the knowledge and beliefs that are obsolete or inappropriate, we need to integrate and develop the remaining knowledge and new knowledge. It is likely that this will involve wholesale revision of many of our social institutions and the likely creation of new social institutions. Change will also likely be necessary with the way our ordinary lives are structured and how we engage in the most basic of social functions.
Once Anthony has given us his perspective, we will present an example of how we have applied this model in the past. In this aim, we have selected this paper, which was published in Social Work in Healthcare and was entitled An Application of the Hospital in the Home and Learning Context. The hospital in the home is an innovation in which doctors and nurses go to the patient's home and are able to administer drugs and take care of the patients following the same rules and the same procedures that the patient would have followed if he or she stays in the hospital. Well, the three steps of our intentional unlearning process, awareness, relinquishing, and relearning, are almost impossible to measure. Therefore, it is important to identify a context that guarantees the presence of these three constructs. In doing so, it is important to mention that we can speak of a facilitating context or a set of variable results. In this work, we selected a set of circumstances that guarantee the presence of our three unlearning processes: awareness, relinquishing, and relearning. Well, the next step was to hold interviews with two different groups. On the one hand, the medical director, the nursing director, and the home care coordinator, and on the other hand, we hold some interviews with the medical staff of the home care unit. In these interviews, we asked them questions regarding to three different frameworks. The first one was the framework in which they were able to identify mistakes or errors or new ways of doing things. That framework was entitled the examination of the lens fitting framework. The second framework was a special contest to support the change of individual habits. It is important not only to identify mistakes, but also learn from your own mistakes and also from mistakes of other people. Only in this way you will be able to forget or put aside outdated knowledge. And the last context was related to the presence of facilitators of the relearning process. In doing so, it's very important that not only the coordinator of the home care unit was open to new understandings, but also the medical director and the nursing directors should both be open to new ways of doing things. On this slide, we can see the final results we got in our interviews. In order to support awareness, it was very important to recognize mistakes, to identify problems, and pay attention to the environment, of course, listen to people. In order to change individual habits and support relinquishing, it was very important to learn from your own mistakes, but also from mistakes of other people. And finally, in order to consolidate new understandings at the organizational level, it was very important the role played by managers. Managers should recognize the value of new information. They should adopt the suggestion of personnel, and of course they should be open to new ways of doing things. Well, just a few ideas to finish this exposition. First, although COVID-19 can be seen as an opportunity for certain things such as rethinking ourselves or rediscovering our cities, we cannot make use of these opportunities making use of outdated knowledge or obsolete knowledge structures. Only by updating knowledge we will be able to achieve satisfactory results for new challenges such as working from home or virtual education. In doing so, unlearning and the three different steps, awareness, relinquishing, and relearning, could be used as a way to overcome the side effect of COVID-19. For instance, disinformation, fake news, or hiding information. Of course, we need further work to identify other challenges, and further work is also required to extrapolate this finding to other domains. I don't know if Anthony wants to add something else.
I'm afraid I've only just begun to scratch the surface of how our research on unlearning can inform our adaptation to the world after COVID-19. Professor Cegarra and I plan to write and speak more extensively on this issue over the next few months. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, and thanks to all for your attention. Just in case you want to know more about unlearning, please see below 3 of our latest references.